Jack Waldren had learned patience in places most people couldn't find on a map. He had learned it in the kind of darkness that swallowed sound, in rooms where the wrong breath meant the difference between mission success and body bags. But none of that training had prepared him for the patience required to raise a 6-year-old daughter alone. Chloe was the center of his universe now, the reason he woke up before dawn to open his small engine repair shop, the reason he came home smelling like motor oil and still managed to cook dinner, help with homework, and read exactly 3 bedtime stories before lights out. She had her mother's eyes, the same deep brown that had first caught his attention across a crowded embassy party in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. Sarah had been gone for 4 years now, taken by a drunk driver on a Tuesday afternoon while Jack was halfway around the world doing things his government would never acknowledge. He had made it home in time for the funeral, barely, and had walked away from everything else the next day. No fanfare, no medals, just a single phone call and a flight back to Cedar Mill, Oregon, where his grandmother had left him a small house and an even smaller shop. That was enough. That was more than enough. Saturday mornings at Rosie's Diner had become their ritual. Chloe would order the same thing every week, chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream, and Jack would drink black coffee and watch her arrange her food into elaborate patterns before eating. She was an artist, his daughter. She saw the world differently than other kids, found beauty in arrangements and sequences that adults walked past without noticing. The diner was quiet this morning, the usual crowd of retirees and farmers occupying their regular spots. Marge, who had been working the counter since before Jack was born, had already brought their order without asking. She knew. Everyone in Cedar Mill knew Jack and Chloe by now. The quiet mechanic and his imaginative daughter were fixtures in a town that valued routine. Jack was watching Chloe build a whipped cream mountain when the door banged open hard enough to rattle the windows. The man who walked in was large, not tall but wide, with the kind of build that came from gym vanity rather than actual work. His clothes screamed money, designer jeans, a leather jacket that cost more than most people's monthly rent, a watch that caught the light like it was begging to be noticed. Behind him came 2 others, younger, dressed similarly, carrying themselves with the swagger of people who had never been told no. Jack clocked them immediately, the way they moved, the way their eyes swept the room looking for weakness rather than threat. These were not dangerous men. They were men who had been dangerous to people who couldn't fight back, and that distinction had made them soft in ways they didn't understand. The leader, the one in front, scanned the diner until his gaze landed on the corner booth, on Chloe specifically, and then on Jack. Something flickered in his expression, the predatory recognition of someone who had found his morning's entertainment. Jack returned his attention to Chloe, keeping the men in his peripheral vision while his body language projected nothing but calm disinterest. "Daddy, can I have more syrup?" Chloe asked. "You have plenty, sweetheart. Eat what's on your plate first." "But the mountain needs a river." Jack smiled despite the tension building in his shoulders. "One river. That's it." The shadow fell across their table before Chloe could pour. Jack looked up slowly, deliberately, giving nothing away. The man in the leather jacket was standing too close, intentionally invading their space. "This booth's reserved," the man said, his voice carrying through the quiet diner. Jack didn't respond immediately. He reached over and helped Chloe steady the syrup bottle, then folded his hands on the table. "There are 6 empty booths. I want this one." Marge appeared beside them, her weathered face tight with concern. "Mr. Vance, there's a lovely spot by the window I can—" "Did I ask you?" The man, Vance, didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on Jack with the intensity of someone who needed to establish dominance. "Move." Jack met his gaze steadily. "We're eating." "Do you know who I am?" "Someone who's interrupting my daughter's breakfast." Vance's jaw tightened. Behind him, his companion shifted, sensing the confrontation building. The diner had gone completely silent, forks frozen halfway to mouths, conversations dying mid-sentence. "I'm Graham Vance. My family owns half the property in this county, including the lot your little shop sits on. So when I tell you to move, you move." Jack processed this information without reaction. He knew the name. The Vances were old money, the kind of family that had built their fortune generations ago and spent the subsequent decades learning how to leverage it against anyone who inconvenienced them. Graham was the youngest son, the one the family kept paying to make problems disappear. There had been rumors, incidents at bars, complaints that never went anywhere, lawsuits that settled quietly. "Mr. Vance," Jack said quietly, "I'm asking you to step away from my daughter." Chloe had gone very still, her hand finding Jack's under the table. He could feel her trembling slightly, and something cold and precise began to wake in the back of his mind. The thing he had buried when he walked away, the thing that had kept him alive in places where death was a matter of inches and milliseconds. Vance leaned down, his face inches from Chloe's. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Your daddy teach you it's okay to be rude to people?" That was the line. The invisible boundary that once crossed changed everything. Jack's hand moved before conscious thought caught up. Not to strike, but to place his palm flat against Vance's chest and push him back with exactly enough force to create distance. Vance stumbled, caught off guard by the speed and precision of the movement. His face flushed red. "You just made a very big mistake." He swung. The punch was telegraphed, obvious, carrying all of his weight behind it in a way that would have devastated an untrained person. Jack was not untrained. He deflected the blow with his forearm, redirected Vance's momentum, and in one fluid motion that lasted less than 2 seconds, had the larger man face down on the tile with his arm locked behind his back. The position was controlling without being damaging, the kind of restraint taught to people who needed to neutralize threats without creating corpses. Vance's companions lurched forward, but Jack's voice stopped them cold. "Don't." Something in his tone, some frequency that existed beneath the words themselves, made both men freeze. They had heard dangerous before. This was different. This was the voice of someone who had given orders in hell and expected them to be obeyed. "Daddy?" Chloe's voice was small. Jack's expression softened instantly as he looked at her. "It's okay, baby. Finish your pancakes. This will be over in a minute." He returned his attention to Vance, who was struggling uselessly against a hold he couldn't break. "You're going to stand up now. You're going to apologize to my daughter, and then you're going to leave." "I'll destroy you," Vance hissed. "I'll take your shop, your house, You'll apologize and leave." Jack applied just enough pressure to remind Vance of his current position. "Choose." The silence stretched. Every person in the diner watched, barely breathing. Finally, Vance's body went slack. Fine, I'm sorry." Jack released him and stepped back, positioning himself between Vance and Chloe. The larger man scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. "This isn't over?" "It is for today." Vance straightened his jacket, trying to recover some dignity. His eyes swept over Jack one more time, catching on something, the edge of the tattoo visible beneath Jack's rolled sleeve. He didn't recognize it, couldn't possibly understand what the black triangle and its distinctive markings signified. But he filed it away, another detail to be used later. The three men left without another word, the door swinging shut behind them with a bang that made several customers flinch. Jack turned back to find Chloe watching him with wide eyes. "That man was mean," she said softly. "Yes, he was." "You weren't scared." Jack knelt beside the booth, bringing himself to her level. "I was scared for you. That's different. But you protected me. Always, baby. Always." Marge appeared with a fresh cup of coffee, her hands shaking slightly. "Jack, I'm so sorry. If I'd known he was going to—" "Not your fault, Marge." He accepted the coffee with a nod. "We're okay." But as he slid back into the booth and watched Chloe return to her pancake mountain, Jack knew that okay was temporary. He had seen the look in Graham Vance's eyes, the promise of retaliation. Men like that didn't accept defeat. They just changed battlefields. The first sign came Monday morning. Jack arrived at his shop to find the front window smashed, glass scattered across the concrete floor like scattered diamonds. Nothing had been taken. The cash register sat untouched, The tools still hung in their designated places. This wasn't robbery. This was a message. He cleaned it up alone, sweeping the glass into a pile while the morning sun crept across the floor. He had faced worse, had operated in conditions where a broken window would have been a vacation. But this wasn't about him anymore. This was about what the escalation might mean for Chloe. The second sign came Tuesday. Mrs. Patterson, who ran Chloe's after-school program, called with regret in her voice. "Jack, I'm so sorry, but we've had a complaint filed, anonymous but detailed, about the program's safety protocols. The state is sending an inspector, and until they clear us, I can't take any new children." Chloe's been coming for 2 years. "I know, but with the investigation pending—" She trailed off, and Jack heard the fear beneath her words. Someone with power had made a phone call. Someone who wanted Jack to know that his daughter's world could be disrupted at will. Wednesday brought a visit from the county health inspector to his shop, an unscheduled review that found 3 violations that had never existed before. Jack watched the man check boxes on forms with the mechanical precision of someone following orders rather than protocols. By Thursday, 2 of his regular customers called to cancel standing repair jobs. Both sounded apologetic. Both mentioned vague concerns about liability. Both hung up quickly like they were afraid someone might be listening. Jack understood warfare. He understood the application of pressure across multiple fronts, the strategy of exhaustion, the way an enemy could be broken without a single direct confrontation. Graham Vance was waging a campaign, and Jack was outmatched in resources, if not in capability. Friday afternoon, he picked Chloe up from school and drove to a small park on the edge of town rather than going straight home. She needed to run, to burn energy, to exist in a world where adult conflicts didn't touch her. He sat on a bench and watched her climb the jungle gym, her laughter carrying across the empty playground. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "Mr. Waldren." The voice was professional, female, unfamiliar. "I'm calling from the Oregon Department of Child Services. We've received a report regarding your daughter's welfare and need to schedule a home visit." Jack's blood cold in a way it hadn't since the bad days. "On what grounds?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics of the complaint, but I can tell you it alleges concerns about supervision and living conditions. Are you available Monday at 9 a.m.? My daughter is healthy, happy, and well cared for." "I'm sure she is, Mr. Waldron. This is simply a routine follow-up to ensure compliance with state standards. We'll see you Monday." The line went dead. Jack lowered the phone slowly, watching Chloe hang upside down from the monkey bars, her hair sweeping the mulch below. She was laughing, oblivious to the fact that someone was trying to take her away from him. Number, not someone, Graham Vance. The pattern was clear now. Not direct confrontation, but systematic destruction. Isolate the target, remove support structures, apply pressure until the target either submits or breaks. It was a strategy Jack recognized because he had used variations of it himself, in contexts where the targets deserved what was coming. He had never imagined being on the receiving end in his own hometown with his daughter as collateral. "Daddy, watch me," Chloe called out. "I see you, baby. Be careful." "I'm always careful." She dropped from the bars and landed in a crouch, then immediately started climbing again. So much energy, so much joy, so much he could lose. Jack pulled out his phone again and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name he hadn't called in 3 years. Marcus Webb, former teammate, current private investigator with connections to people who operated in the gray spaces between legal and necessary. The phone rang 4 times before a familiar voice answered. Well, Jack Waldron. I thought you were dead or meditating on a mountaintop." "I need help, Marcus." A pause. In their world, those words carried weight. "What kind?" "Someone with money is trying to take my daughter, using the system. Lawyers, inspectors, CPS. I need information." "Name?" "Graham Vance, Cedar Mill, Oregon. Old money family." "Give me 48 hours. "I've got until Monday." "Then I'll work fast. Jack?" "Yeah?" "Whatever you're planning, remember who you are." not who you were. The line clicked dead. Jack pocketed the phone and walked to the jungle gym, lifting Chloe off the bars and spinning her around until she shrieked with delight. "Ice cream?" he asked. "Before dinner?" It's been that kind of week. Her eyes went wide with excitement, all thoughts of routine forgotten. As they walked to the truck, Jack caught movement in his peripheral vision. A black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted too dark for casual observation. Watching, always watching. He loaded Chloe into her car seat, made sure she was secure, and then stood beside the truck for a long moment, making eye contact with the tinted windows. He didn't wave, didn't gesture, just stood there, letting them see him see them. Then he got in the truck and drove to get ice cream because his daughter wanted chocolate chip, and there were still some battles worth fighting with joy instead of fists. The weekend passed in a strange suspension, hours stretched thin by anticipation. Jack cleaned the house twice, organized every closet, made sure there was nothing a hostile inspector could use against him. He cooked meals, played games with Chloe, read her extra stories at bedtime. He held her tighter than usual, and if she noticed, she didn't say anything. Sunday night, after she was asleep, his phone rang. "Jack." Marcus's voice was grim. "It's worse than you thought. Tell me." Graham Vance has a history. 7 women have filed complaints against him over the past decade. Harassment, assault, 1 attempted rape. Every single one was settled out of court with NDAs and payments. Family money made it all disappear. Jack's grip tightened on the phone. What else? He's got a judge in his pocket, a cousin on the family court bench. 2 CPS investigators have received donations to their kids' college funds from shell companies traced back to Vance family holdings. Jack, this isn't just some rich kid throwing his weight around. This is a system built to protect him. Can you prove it? I can prove enough. Wire transfers, meeting logs, 1 investigator who's willing to talk if she's protected. But it'll take time to build a case that sticks, time you might not have. Monday morning, CPS is coming. Then you need to buy that time, make sure you've got documentation of every interaction, every threat. If they try to remove Chloe, you've got rights. Exercise them, delay, fight through the system while I build the bomb that blows their system apart. Jack exhaled slowly. There's another way. Jack, I know people who owe me favors, people who could make Graham Vance understand the cost of what he's doing. And then what? You go to prison and Chloe goes into the system anyway? Come on, man, you're smarter than that. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of who Jack had been and who he was trying to be. You're right, Jack finally said. I know, stay the course. I'll have more for you by Wednesday. And Jack, record everything tomorrow. Everything. The call ended and Jack sat alone in the darkness of his living room, listening to the quiet sounds of his daughter sleeping down the hall. He had killed men in service of abstract concepts like national security and geopolitical stability. He had pulled triggers without hesitation because the mission required it. But this was different. This was personal, and personal required a different kind of warfare. The CPS investigator arrived at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, as if hoping to catch Jack unprepared. Her name was Sandra Reeves, a thin woman with suspicious eyes and a clipboard that she wielded like a weapon. Jack had been ready since 6. The house was immaculate. Chloe was dressed in her favorite purple dress, her hair neatly braided, her stuffed rabbit sitting properly on her made bed. Breakfast dishes were washed and put away. Every surface gleamed. Mr. Waldren, Sandra's voice was carefully neutral. Thank you for accommodating us on short notice. Of course, Chloe's welfare is my only priority. He let her in, watching her eyes scan the living room with the precision of someone looking for ammunition. She found none. The house was modest but warm, filled with Chloe's artwork on the walls and books arranged neatly on shelves. A home, clearly and undeniably. The complaint mentioned concerns about supervision, Sandra said, consulting her clipboard. Specifically that your daughter is often left unsupervised while you work. I run a small engine repair shop 6 blocks from here. Chloe is either at school, at her after-school program, or with me at the shop. She has never been left unsupervised. The after-school program is currently under investigation. An investigation triggered by an anonymous complaint filed the same week I had an altercation with Graham Vance at Rosie's Diner. The same week my shop window was smashed, my business was subjected to an unscheduled health inspection, and 2 long-term customers suddenly canceled their contracts. Sandra's pen paused. Are you suggesting these events are connected? I'm stating facts and leaving the connections to your professional judgment. Mr. Waldren, I'm here to evaluate your daughter's welfare, not to investigate. Then let me show you her room. He led her down the hall, where Chloe was sitting on her bed, carefully coloring in a book. She looked up when they entered, her expression wary. Chloe, this is Ms. Reeves. She's here to make sure you're happy and healthy. I am happy and healthy, Chloe said, with the direct certainty of childhood. Daddy makes me breakfast every day and reads me stories, and he always picks me up on time. Sandra knelt to Chloe's level, her expression softening slightly. That sounds nice. Is there anything you wish was different? Chloe considered this seriously. I wish mean people would leave us alone. The answer hung in the air. Sandra glanced at Jack, something flickering behind her professional facade. What mean people, sweetheart? The man at the diner who tried to take our booth. He scared me. Daddy protected me, but now there are cars watching our house and people calling on the phone, and Daddy gets sad when he thinks I'm not looking. Jack's throat tightened. Children saw everything. They understood more than adults gave them credit for. Sandra stood slowly, her clipboard forgotten at her side. She looked at Jack for a long moment, and he saw the conflict in her eyes, the war between her job and her conscience. Mr. Waldren, I'm going to be direct with you. The nature of this complaint, the timing, the specificity, it doesn't match the reality I'm seeing here. I know. I can only report what I observe, and what I observe is a clean home, a healthy child, and a father who clearly loves his daughter. She paused. But you should know that pressure can come from multiple directions. My report isn't the only factor in these decisions. I understand. Do you? Her voice dropped. Because someone with significant resources is very interested in this case, and I've seen what happens to families when that kind of interest is sustained. Jack met her gaze steadily. I've faced worse. Something in his tone made her pause, made her really look at him for the first time, at the way he stood, balanced and ready, at the controlled precision of his movements, at the calm certainty in his eyes that came from having walked through fire and emerged on the other side. I believe you have, she said quietly. My report will reflect what I've seen today. Beyond that, I can't help you. But for what it's worth, Mr. Waldren, I hope whoever's doing this underestimates you as badly as I suspect they have. She gathered her things and left without another word. Jack watched her car disappear down the street, then closed the door and leaned against it, allowing himself one moment of relief before the next battle began. Daddy? Chloe appeared in the hallway, rabbit in hand. Is the lady gone? She's gone, baby. Was I good? He crossed to her and lifted her into his arms, holding her close. You were perfect. You're always perfect. I meant what I said. Her small voice was fierce. I don't like the mean people. Neither do I. Are you going to make them stop? Jack thought about the phone calls he could make, the people he could contact, the very specific skill set he had spent a decade acquiring and 3 years trying to forget. He thought about Marcus's warning, about the system, about the right way and the wrong way and the way that actually worked. Yes, he said finally. I'm going to make them stop, but I'm going to do it the right way, okay? The way that keeps us together. Promise? Promise. She hugged him tighter, and Jack closed his eyes against the ache in his chest. He had made a lot of promises in his life, had broken more than a few in service of missions that demanded moral flexibility. But this one, this promise to his daughter, was the only one that mattered anymore. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he would keep this one. The confrontation came 3 days later, in the last place Jack expected. Chloe had been invited to a birthday party for one of her classmates, a celebration at the Cedar Mill Community Center that promised cake, games, and enough sugar to fuel a 6-year-old for days. Jack had almost declined, wary of public exposure, but Chloe's excitement had been impossible to resist. He would stay, he would watch, he would be ready. The community center was a large, aging building that served multiple functions for the town: meeting hall, event space, and occasional venue for local politics. Today it was filled with streamers and balloons, children running between tables while parents clustered in groups, supervising from a distance. Jack positioned himself near the door, a cup of punch in hand, watching Chloe throw herself into a game of musical chairs with the abandon of perfect childhood joy. She was laughing. She was happy. For this moment at least, the darkness that had crept into their lives was held at bay. "Mr. Waldren." The voice came from behind him, cultured and cold. Jack turned to find a woman in her 60s, impeccably dressed, with silver hair and eyes that held the calculating intelligence of someone who had spent a lifetime wielding power. "I don't believe we've met," Jack said carefully. "Eleanor Vance, Graham's mother." She didn't offer her hand. "I think it's time we had a conversation." "I'm here for a birthday party, Mrs. Vance, not a conversation." "Then consider this an addendum to the party, one that will determine whether your next few months are uncomfortable or unbearable." Jack's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, subtle enough that only someone trained would notice. Eleanor Vance noticed. "My son told me about your little display at the diner, the restraint you showed, the precision. Graham thought you were lucky. I know better." "Do you?" "I've employed security professionals for 40 years, Mr. Waldron. I know the difference between a man who has been in fights and a man who has been trained to end them. You're the latter." She paused. "Former military, I assume. Something specialized given the tattoo my son described." Jack said nothing. "It doesn't matter," Eleanor continued. "Whatever you were, you're now a single father with a small business and a daughter who depends on you. That's a vulnerable position, Mr. Waldron, one that can be made significantly more vulnerable." "Is this a threat?" "It's an observation. My family has resources you cannot comprehend. We have patience you cannot outlast. If we decide to make your life difficult, we will succeed. The only variable is how much collateral damage occurs in the process." Jack glanced at Chloe, still laughing, still playing, still innocent. Then he looked back at Eleanor Vance. "What do you want?" "An apology, public if possible. My son was humiliated, and that humiliation has consequences for our family's reputation. You will make it clear that the incident at the diner was a misunderstanding, that Graham was not the aggressor, and that you overreacted." "Your son frightened my daughter and tried to assault me. There was no misunderstanding." "There is whatever version of events we decide there is, Mr. Waldron. That's how power works." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You have until Friday to make this right. After that, the gloves come off. I'll see your shop condemned. I'll see your custody challenged. I'll see every aspect of your life examined and found wanting. And when you're broken and alone, when your daughter is in foster care and your name is mud in this town, you'll wish you had simply apologized." The children shrieked with laughter as the music stopped. Another player eliminated from musical chairs. Chloe jumped up and down, celebrating her continued participation. Jack watched her for a long moment, then turned back to Eleanor Vance. "You made a mistake, Mrs. Vance." "Excuse me?" "You assume that because I live quietly, I am quiet. You assume that because I work with my hands, I am simple. You assume that because I love my daughter, I am weak." He held her gaze, and for the first time, Eleanor saw something in his eyes that made her certainty waver. "I have faced enemies who would make your family look like children playing at power. I have operated in places where the rules you rely on don't exist. I have done things that would give you nightmares, and I walked away from all of it to give my daughter a normal life." His voice never rose, never wavered, but each word carried the weight of absolute conviction. "If you come at my family, I will dismantle everything you've built. Not with violence. That would be too easy. I'll use the same weapons you use: lawyers, investigators, journalists. I'll find every dirty secret your family has buried, every scandal you've paid to suppress, every crime you've covered up, and I will expose all of it systematically and completely until the Vance name is synonymous with corruption. Eleanor's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. Am I? Jack pulled out his phone, opened a file, and showed her the screen. A document dense with names, dates, transactions, the preliminary results of Marcus's investigation. 7 women silenced, a judge on the family payroll, 2 compromised CPS investigators, and that's just what my people found in 4 days, Mrs. Vance. Imagine what they'll find in 4 weeks. He pocketed the phone. I didn't want this. I just wanted to eat breakfast with my daughter. Your son made that impossible, and now you've made it worse. What do you want? Her voice had lost its commanding edge. I want you to leave us alone. Completely. Permanently. No more harassment, no more investigations, no more pressure on my business. Your son stays away from my family, and I stay away from yours. And if I refuse? Then everything I have goes to the press, the state attorney general, and every regulatory body with jurisdiction over your family's businesses. By this time next month, you'll be too busy defending lawsuits and answering subpoenas to worry about a mechanic who embarrassed your son. The birthday party continued around them, oblivious to the war being waged in quiet voices by the punch bowl. Chloe won musical chairs, her shriek of victory piercing the air. Eleanor Vance watched the little girl with an expression that might have been regret, might have been calculation. You're not what I expected, Mr. Waldren. People rarely are. She was silent for a long moment. Then, I'll need assurances that the information won't be released regardless. You have my word. As long as my family is left in peace, the files stay buried. And Graham? Needs to understand that actions have consequences. Maybe if he'd learned that earlier, we wouldn't be here. Eleanor nodded slowly. I'll speak with him. Make sure he listens. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Waldren, you would have made an excellent addition to my security team. It's a shame we had to meet under these circumstances. For what it's worth, Mrs. Vance, I hope we never have to meet again. She walked away, her heels clicking against the community center floor, her back straight but something diminished in her bearing. Jack watched her go, then turned back to the party where Chloe was running toward him with a piece of cake in each hand. Daddy, Daddy, I won! And look, they had chocolate and vanilla, so I got both. He knelt to receive her, taking one of the plates with a smile that felt for the first time in weeks genuine. That's my girl. A winner and an optimist. What's an optimist? Someone who believes things will work out. Are you an optimist, Daddy? Jack looked at the door where Eleanor Vance had disappeared, at the bright streamers and laughing children, at his daughter's face smeared with frosting. I'm trying to be, baby. I'm trying to be. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way that follows a storm. Gradually, Jack's life returned to normal, the small pieces falling back into place one by one. The after-school program's investigation concluded with no findings. Customers began returning to the shop. The black SUV no longer appeared on his street. He received no further calls from CPS, no surprise inspections, no anonymous complaints. The Vance family had withdrawn completely, their attention directed elsewhere, their resources deployed in defense rather than attack. Marcus called one evening, 3 weeks after the confrontation. Thought you'd want to know. Graham Vance is being shipped off to Europe. Officially, it's a business opportunity. Unofficially, his mother is getting him as far away from potential scandal as possible. And the files? Secure. Insurance policy, in case they ever forget the lesson. Jack sat on his porch, watching Chloe chase fireflies in the front yard, her laughter carrying through the warm evening air. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. That's what friends are for, even friends who dropped off the map for 3 years. I had to become someone else. I know, and from what I can see, you succeeded. She's a lucky kid, Jack. I'm the lucky one. After the call ended, Jack remained on the porch, content to simply exist in this moment of peace. He had spent so many years living in the spaces between moments, always anticipating the next threat, the next mission, the next violence. Learning to be present, to be still, to be a father instead of a soldier, that was its own kind of training. "Daddy!" Chloe came running up the steps, her hands cupped around something glowing. "I caught one! Look!" She opened her palms just enough to reveal the firefly inside, its light pulsing soft and golden. Jack leaned close, sharing in her wonder. "You going to keep it?" "No." She opened her hands fully, letting the insect fly free. "Miss Patterson says fireflies die if you keep them in jars. They need to be free to be happy." "That's very wise." "I know." She climbed into his lap, settling against his chest with the easy trust of a child who had never doubted her father's love. "Daddy, are the mean people really gone?" "Really gone." "Forever." Jack thought about the files Marcus was holding, the insurance policy that would remain in place for years to come, the silent threat that would keep the Vance family at bay long after Graham returned from Europe. "Forever," he said, and meant it. They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, watching fireflies dance across the lawn like tiny scattered stars. The world was full of darkness, Jack knew, full of people who used power to hurt others, who built empires on the silence of their victims. But the world also had this: a child's laugh, a father's love, and the quiet courage to stand against those who thought strength meant cruelty. He had been trained to be a weapon, but weapons could be put down, could be transformed into tools for building rather than destroying. The skills he had learned in shadow places could protect as well as harm, defend as well as attack. Tomorrow he would open his shop, fix engines, wave to neighbors who had become friends. He would pick Chloe up from school and listen to her stories about recess and art projects and the complex social dynamics of 6-year-olds. He would cook dinner, help with homework, read exactly 3 bedtime stories. And if danger ever came again, if anyone ever threatened his daughter, he would be ready. Not because he wanted violence, but because love sometimes required the willingness to stand between innocence and harm. The end came not with a bang, but with a new beginning, 6 months after the confrontation at the community center. Jack was under the hood of an old Chevy when the bell above his shop door chimed. He looked up, expecting a customer, and found instead a woman he recognized from somewhere. Auburn hair, green eyes, a face that carried both strength and sadness. "Mr. Waldren?" She stepped forward hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I was hoping we could talk." Jack wiped his hands on a rag, studying her. The recognition clicked. "You're the CPS investigator, Sandra Reeves." "Former CPS investigator. I resigned 2 months ago." She glanced around the shop, taking in the neat rows of tools, the organized workbench, the hand-drawn pictures taped to the wall beside his desk. Chloe's artwork, colorful and chaotic and full of joy. "I've been following the Vance case, the real one, not the public version." Jack set down the rag. "What real one?" "The investigation that started after an anonymous tip led state authorities to examine certain financial irregularities in family court. A judge has already recused himself. 2 of my former colleagues are cooperating with investigators, and Graham Vance's list of silenced victims is getting shorter every day." She met his eyes directly. "That was you, wasn't it? The anonymous tip." "I don't know what you're talking about." The ghost of a smile crossed Sandra's face. "Of course you don't." She pulled an envelope from her purse and set it on his workbench. "This is from the women Graham hurt, the ones who are finally speaking out. They wanted you to know that your daughter, Chloe, was what gave them courage." "I don't understand." "You stood up to him, in public, in front of witnesses, and nothing happened to you. For years, they believed the Vance family was untouchable, that no one could stand against them and survive. You proved that wrong." She pushed the envelope closer. "There's a letter from each of them, and a gift card to that ice cream place Chloe likes. They wanted to thank her, too, for being brave enough to tell me the truth during the home visit." Jack stared at the envelope for a long moment. "I was just protecting my daughter." "I know. That's what made it powerful. You weren't trying to be a hero. You were just being a father." She moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Waldron, I've seen a lot of families in my career. Good ones and bad ones, broken ones and healing ones. What you have with Chloe, that's the real thing. Don't ever doubt that." "Thank you, Ms. Reeves." "Sandra, and you're welcome." She left, and Jack stood alone in his shop, holding an envelope full of gratitude from people he had never met, for battles he had never intended to fight. When Chloe arrived after school, bouncing through the door with her backpack and her endless energy, she found him sitting on the workbench, the letters spread out before him. "Daddy, what's that?" "Messages from some people who wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For being brave." Chloe climbed up beside him, her legs swinging over the edge of the bench. "Were you brave, Daddy?" "I tried to be. But you know what?" He pulled her close. "You're the really brave one. You told the truth when it mattered. That takes more courage than anything I've ever done." "It wasn't hard," she said simply. "I just told the lady what happened." "Exactly. And because you did, other people found the courage to tell their truth too." Chloe considered this with the gravity of a 6-year-old confronting a complex concept. "So being brave isn't about fighting." "Sometimes it is, but mostly it's about telling the truth, even when it's scary. About standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. About protecting the people you love, even when it costs you. Like you protect me. Like we protect each other." She hugged him then, her small arms wrapping around his neck with fierce determination. "I'll always tell the truth, Daddy, and I'll always be brave." "I know you will, baby. I know you will." They sat together as the afternoon light slanted through the shop windows, a father and daughter surrounded by engines and tools and the simple evidence of a life rebuilt from ashes. Outside, the world continued its complicated turning, full of people who used power for harm and others who stood against them with nothing but courage and conviction. But in this moment, in this place, there was only love, only peace, only the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. And somewhere in an office far away, a file marked Vance Graham continued to grow, each new testimony adding to the weight of consequences that even old money couldn't buy away. The system that had been built to protect the powerful was slowly, methodically being dismantled by the very people it had silenced. Justice moved slowly, but it moved. And in Cedar Mill, Oregon, a mechanic taught his daughter to change oil and check tire pressure, to treat customers with respect and tools with care. He taught her that strength came in many forms, that courage wasn't the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it, that the most powerful weapon against darkness was simply refusing to become dark yourself. Chloe grew up knowing that her father had once been something different, something dangerous, but that he had chosen to become something better. She grew up watching him help neighbors, mentor young people, volunteer at community events. She grew up understanding that the measure of a man wasn't what he was capable of doing, but what he chose to do. And years later, when she had children of her own, she would tell them the story of the bully at the diner and the father who stood up without ever raising his voice. She would tell them about courage and conviction, about the quiet heroism of ordinary days, about the way love could transform warriors into protectors. She would tell them that their grandfather had been many things in his life, had worn many masks and played many roles, but that the truest version of him was the simplest, a single father who would do anything to keep his daughter safe. And every time she told the story, she would remember that morning at the community center, the way her father had knelt to her level after winning musical chairs, the chocolate cake in both hands, and the smile on his face that told her everything was going to be okay, because it was, because he had made it so, because that was what fathers did. The fireflies still danced in the yard of the old house generations later. The shop still stood, though it had grown and changed over the years, passed down through the family like an heirloom. And on the wall, behind the desk, a frame held a simple drawing, a little girl with braids and a tall man with kind eyes, standing together under a sun made of yellow crayon. Underneath, in a child's careful handwriting, "Daddy and me, forever,